Alright boys, so even if you didn't summon for Muramasa, maybe you already got Space Ishtar, there's still another servant over on the NA version of the game that's drawing a lot of hype. That servant is none other than literally the boy among boys, the Chad among Chads, the man of all men, Super Orion. I mean, my dude's literally got muscles on top of muscles growing out of muscles I didn't even know existed. And as if to reflect this grandiose stature that he has going on, this boy does a lot of damage and, a lot of people are trying to go for him because he's pretty dang good. One of the better solo servants in the game because unlike say like Ku or Hassan that maybe just want to slowly win the game through this war of attrition with the opponent, Super Orion's like, look buddy, I'm a solo servant, but I really am not trying to stick around for a while. I'm going to nuke you into the ground with my biceps, and then I'm just gonna, end this fight in like 3 turns, or I'm gonna get knocked out. It's a really fun type of solo servant, and again, he can trivialize a lot of content in the game. You just bring him in there, pop 2 NPs, pop all the skills, bada boom, bada bing, enemies destroyed. So we're going to talk about him in today's video. I haven't really covered a lot of the other servants going on raid up, like, Saber Alter, for instance, like her maid version is going on raid up. I haven't covered like Abigail or anything because I don't know if they just really command the type of hype that Super Orion has. I mean, people are considering, okay, do I summon for Muramasa, Space Ishtar, or even Super Orion? Because he does kind of demand that attention because he is really good. I will say before we begin, I would recommend you either pick Muramasa or someone like Space Ishtar. I think they're going to give you a little more value as your account gets stronger and as you play the game for like longer periods of time. But as a newer player, Super Orion is especially tantalizing because he can really trivialize a lot of harder fights that you might run into in the game. So we're going to talk about all of that in today's video, but before we begin, if you have not already, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for that sweet daily FGO content. Also, make sure you come out to the Twitch streams, which are every weekday over at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That, of course, is linked down in the description down below. And hey, if you're ever having a question of like, man, there are way too many servants on raid up, who should I summon for? Here's my box. You can send that down in the Discord. We have an FGO chat where we can help people out and we can kind of talk and chat. And if I'm not available, there's like a bajillion other people that I'm sure can help you out. With all of that being said, we can now actually officially begin, starting off with Super Orion's hits. Now, anytime I talk about Super Orion, you'll pretty much hear me say that as soon as you pop the second NP, you're pretty much cooking. After the first NP, you can do a lot of damage, but it's really after you fire that second one that this guy turns into just like an absolute unstoppable wrecking ball that just murks everything in his path. And I guess in a way to try to balance that, they give him a triple buster deck with 1 arts card to maybe make it a little bit harder for him to like refund that second NP. But they also didn't want it to be impossible, so they gave him a 3-hit arts card with a 0.96% NP gain stat, meaning if you're critting on that, you're going to refund like pretty much his entire NP, and critting is like the absolute name of the game for Orion. That's not going to be a problem for him, even with that 1 quick card with 8% star gen. So I kind of like how he's built. There's maybe a little bit of RNG if you're like missing that arts card for follow-up NPs to get like the second one. But as soon as you do find it, especially if you're using him as a solo servant where you don't have to like really worry at all about finding it because you'll always have it available, you can kind of fire those NPs and then you get to benefit having the triple buster deck because you get to hit with some of the hardest cards in the entire game. That's actually kind of all you need to know about his actual hits is you fire the arts card as much as you can to get that NP going. Then once you've got that nice damage loop set up, you just obliterate and slam the enemy into the ground with those big thick buster cards. And then you win the game or you lose, right? You either do enough damage that you obliterated the enemy or they just had like slightly too much survivability and you lose, I guess. But Orion's skills are all pretty much tailored to help him get around all enemies, right? He's not really designed to be stopped by these random schmucks with their dodges or their invincibilities. He's got stuff to make sure that they're just not going to throw up a random dodge and stop him from slamming them into the ground. But first, let's talk about some of the skills. So starting off with skill 1, This is going to be one of those skills that you just go ahead and pop whenever you're ready to do your damage. Like ideally when I use Super Orion, I pop it once the second NP is ready to go, because this is giving him a 50% buster buff for 1 turn and then a special damage mod against wild beast or demonic enemies for 1 turn on a 5-turn cooldown. Now, usually when I talk about servants with 1-turn buffs, I usually don't like them because you guys know that I like my servants that are able to stay very consistent over like 3+ turns and can really hang in those longer and tougher boss fights that we're starting to get. But this is actually not a huge issue for Orion because you're either going to use this on, like, let's say the first NP and you kind of just need to break through the first break bar and it kind of just gives you that little bit of extra damage, because trust me, once you start looping the NP and everything, you're not going to have any trouble with damage. You're just going to do so much crit damage that it doesn't matter anymore, especially if you're using him in more of a support setup, right, where you've got like Koyenskayas or Merlins around him and they're kind of working to support him. It's really not going to be that big of an issue. Or you're just going to wait for like the last turn, pop this and slam the enemy for like a 1 million crit. Generally, it turns out to be kind of fine because his NP is just so broken in and of itself, and it's pretty much the only thing he needs. This is just like extra bits of damage that you're going to be able to give to yourself whenever you need that crucial little bit of gas. So usually I don't like 1-turn pump and dump skills, but this one's actually fine because of how Super Orion likes to play. Plus, it's a 50% buster buff. That's always going to be good with a triple buster deck. And then a special damage mod against Wild Beast and Demonic. Those are both very, very strong damage mods to have, especially Demonic. Moving on over to his second skill, this is kind of designed to not only give him a little bit more consistency, I would say, it's also supposed to keep him alive and start off his combos, right? His wombo combo of like refunding NP and whatnot. So you've got a Guts that's going to keep him alive because it's a 3k revival that also lasts for 3 turns. This is going to ensure that even if you get some really bad RNG early on, the enemy tries to like crit you into the ground or something, your Orion is still going to be chugging along and he still has a little bit of leeway when it comes to taking some hits. The 3-turn attack buff is just kind of there to give him some consistent damage that maybe you've lost the first skill, maybe you had to use it early on. You still at least got that attack buff in the back for a little bit of extra damage. It also pairs very nice with his NP because, spoiler alert, he gives himself a 30% attack buff on his NP. So if you have this up after firing the NP, he's basically got 50% attack at the bare minimum, especially if you start looping the NP. Again, we'll talk about that later. And then he gives himself 20 stars. This kind of kicks off his little combo of spamming the arts buff and, you know, critting everybody with the arts card to like massively refund his NP or just get some really nice early crits. Because like I said, if you want to pop the first skill early in conjunction with this second skill here, you might be able to just shave off like the first bar of an enemy, right? You get like 1 or 2 buster crits in there. Again, that attack buff, even without the NP, is still multiplying into that first skill, especially if they're a wild beast or demonic enemy. Those are 3 buffs multiplying into each other. So you can look at this as either like his way to just easily clear out like a first bar on an enemy, get himself started, some survivability, or as like a combo starter for his NP loop. Like, it does so much for him and actually pairs very nicely with the first skill. And then the third skill is like the cherry on top. This is a bit better, I found, if you're using him in team setups, right? Because he's getting that star weight, that 500% for 3 turns. He doesn't really need a whole lot because, again, he's an archer and his natural star weight is very high at 153, so he's really not going to be competing for any stars that are being produced. But just in case you want to use him with someone like Koyenskaya or Merlin, because maybe he needs a little bit more sustain because maybe it's a bit of a longer fight and he needs people to kind of keep him around for a bit, this ensures that he's not going to have to fight for those stars. But then he also has this crazy on attack buff that whenever he uses his buster cards, he's going to get a 100% crit damage buff. So, you know, turn 1, if you just want to do a buster brave chain, or even just, you know, double Koyenskaya, or he's got a max K-scope or something, you can like pop the NP plus the 2 buster cards, and now you've got like 300% crit damage because of the 2 on attack buffs here and the 100% crit damage he gets from the NP. It can have him being really insane really, really quickly. Now, keep in mind, this only works for 3 attacks, so you're only ever going to get 300% crit damage, but you hear how ridiculous that sounds. You're only going to get 300% crit damage. That's pretty insane for the cost of just doing like a Buster Brave chain that you're gonna do anyway to do your main like forms of damage. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. It gives him the ability to be like a solo servant and be fine on his own, but also because of the star weight for 3 turns, it allows him to utilize supports that might help him out in longer fights. So overall, the skills are all fine and dandy, they're all really good, but his NP is just, well, it's just something else, let me tell you what. He's giving himself just a bunch of 3-turn buffs. All of these are really good. 3 turns of Pierce Invincibility, so you can't dodge, you can't pop an invincibility buff and just like escape from these big crits. You're getting hit by these no matter what. 3 turns of debuff immunity. No, you're not going to pop your break bar and hit me with a charm or a stun. I'm debuff immune for 3 turns, so that doesn't work. He doesn't stop critting. He drops 10 stars every turn for 3 turns, so he's keeping himself topped off with stars. And again, it's why it kind of gets really good when you start like looping the NPs, especially if you're using them with like Merlin and other guys around and they've got like 20, 30s. You basically got infinite stars at that point. A bare minimum 100% crit damage buff that if for whatever reason you're giving him like Demonic Bodhisattva or something, right? Can go up to 200% crit damage for 3 turns if you want to just invest in the overcharge stuff, so that's insanely nutty. Again, keep in mind, he's already giving himself basically 300% crit damage from his 3rd skill, so like, it's already out of hand. And then he gives himself 30 to 50% attack for 3 turns, depending on NP level. The same attack buff that Castoria gives, right? It's like the same incentive of like, do you go for NP 2, 3, 4, 5 Castoria? Maybe because she can give everybody a 50% attack buff for 3 turns. Yeah, he could do that as well if you go for higher copies, or if you get spooked for a higher copy in the future on like a GSSR or something, right? It's just insane. Like, this is one of the more broken NPs in the game because you just look at it, it's giving you just a smorgasbord of good effects, but then you compare that with everything that he's also doing on his skills. They're like, oh, he's got the debuff immunity plus the gut, so he has survivability and he's immune to debuffs. He's got really good crit damage, but then you realize it's actually insane in conjunction with the 3rd skill. Then you're like, oh, 30% attack buff at NP1, that's a little low. Never mind, it's at bare minimum 50% because of skill 2. Like, he just does a bunch of nutty things, and it's why he could just clean people out really well. And like, one of the only demerits he has is one of his passives that gives himself toxic, so basically it just means that poison hits him a little bit harder, but because of his passive, he's probably never going to get poisoned anyway, right? Because he's debuff immune pretty much most of the time, as long as you're balancing that NP. So like, that demerit just might as well not even exist. Super Orion is dummy nutty. There's definitely a reason that a lot of people are looking forward to this guy and are wanting to summon on him. I do still believe though that Space Ishtar is going to give you a lot more value, especially as your account grows stronger. Same for Muramasa. They're those servants that get better as your account gets better. And also Space Ishtar has the bonus of being able to be any type of servant. So it doesn't really matter what supports you pull, you'll still be able to use her in whatever setups you want to use. Whereas Super Orion definitely has like the most value when your account is at its weakest, right? Because he'll be able to like destroy everything for you and he'll pretty much be your go-to for everything. But as you get better and better servants and you're able to do more and more complex setups and everything, right, it's kind of like, it's not that his value falls off, but like, you're just not going to use him as much unless you just really like Super Orion. Definitely one of those nutty like tier 0 servants, right, that if you have him you definitely have a lot of fun crushing people. But I would at least make sure that you've gotten your copies of like Space Ishtar or Muramasa first. And then if you really want Super Orion, feel free to go summon for him. Again, unless you really care about like Romulus or Karen or Galatea, servants like that coming out in the near future, you don't really have a whole lot to worry about. Maybe you want to hit that Voyager rerun. But we still have a little bit of time before Morgan and all of them start coming out. Although it is kind of like a murderer's row of servants for July, or even like kind of like May through July. Because you got like Morgan, Oberon, Koyanskaya, Castoria comes back. So I'm going to be telling people to save for a little bit, right? I'm going to tell you that like, yeah, in the immediate future, you're fine. But keep in mind, it's going to be really insane around then. But let me know you guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know if you're going for Super Orion. Again, if you summon for him, basically the consensus is he's good enough to summon for. But I don't know if I'd recommend you summon for him because of like the other units that are also on raid up and the units that are coming out in like a couple of months, right? Like Morgan, Koyenskaya, people like that. But let me know if you guys decide to summon or not, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace, late guys.